Rasing Capital 2019, the fully compliant ICO. Gordon Einstein, CKR Law.
I guess question number, okay, this is working. And the firm is now Crypto Law Partners because I've gone full blockchain and crypto. So just so you know, and once I get the happy clicker, we'll be in good shape. Fantastic. So I've been traveling around the world speaking at different blockchain and crypto conferences. I have to say this is the best attended conference I've seen for a year. And having gone to some other conferences, the trend has been slightly lower and lower attendances. This is amazing, the number of people here. So I want to give a big shout out to the people organizing the Blockchain Summit. Now, I'm going to do a quick, this is a half-an-hour presentation that I boiled down into 10 minutes. So I'm going to talk fast. I already talk fast. I'm going to talk even faster. If something is not clear or you want to catch me afterwards, I'm going to be here the next several days, and I'm happy to send you the deck. You won't miss out. Now, just taking a poll of the audience, who thinks that utility tokens are dead? Really? Okay, there's one brave soul. Who thinks that utility tokens are alive and well? Okay. Who's not going to raise their hands no matter what I say, even though I flew in all the way from Los Angeles? Okay, be nice to the guest. I would argue that the days of cowboy utility ICOs are over, but utility tokens are alive and well. In fact, they have to be. And that utility token ICOs are perfectly legitimate. You just need to understand the law. Now, I'm, of course, approaching this from a United States perspective, but as some of the previous speakers covered, these concepts sort of echo throughout the token and ICO ecosystem, so they're good to be aware of. All right, U.S. Attorney, I talk fast. This is a cut version. I'm happy to share. There you go. I always have to give this disclaimer. I'm a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer, probably. Number 4 is the most important one. Don't break the law, in case anyone was unclear. Okay, moving right along. So every avid Instagram user in this audience knows that there's 2 terms or 2 acronyms that get used all the time. There's FUD, which is fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You can say that's what Microsoft tried to do to Linux 10 years ago, if any of you remember that. And then there's the other one, which is a little bit more popular. That's FOMO. That's fear of missing out. There's a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt about utility tokens, but everyone has FOMO because they wish it was 2015, 2016, and they want to get in on it. So the security token offerings are sort of the new hot way maybe to get in. STO's security token offerings are legitimate. I'm doing a bunch of them, but do not leave behind the so old and so seasoned ICO. That's Jamie Dimon. I think he's the chairman of JP Morgan, who was talking down Bitcoin. He definitely was trying to spread the FUD. Meanwhile, everyone wants a Lamborghini, and that's FOMO. Okay, now let's just start with a basic concept that somehow some security regulators and some security attorneys can't seem to wrap their heads around. Does anyone in this room think that every single thing on the planet is a security? Good, because many regulators apparently think that every single thing on this planet is a security. That is not the case. Right? There are many other legally defined categories that have their own rights, purposes, economic functions. There's commodities, there's currencies, there's software licenses, there's shoes, there's dogs. There's even the Dogecoin dog. Okay, I don't know if Dogecoin is a security or not, but the dog is not a security. Keep that in mind. Also, there seems to be a lot of confusion about this. If you have a non-security object or asset, the mere act of tokenizing it does not create a security. Okay, if you have a diamond and you don't add any kind of special sauce to it, and you merely tokenize it, you didn't automatically just create a security. There seems to be a lot of confusion about that. So the tokenized asset may, depending on the jurisdiction, be an asset token or utility token, but it's not necessarily a security token. Also, keep this in mind. A lot of people claim or offer their tokens as securities because they, quote unquote, want to be safe. Well, if the underlying token or the asset behind the token is not a security, that's fraud. You're misrepresenting the nature of the thing you're selling. So not only should you not assume everything is a security, to overly aggressively define everything as a security is misleading to the buyer. Okay, and to sort of respond to a lot of securities attorneys out there, the fact that something is not regulated as a security does not mean that it's not regulated. Everything in life is regulated, especially in the United States. You can't breathe without it being regulated. So there's regulations on commodities, there's regulations on software licenses, usually by state attorney generals. There's regulations on dogs. There's regulations on currencies, obviously. So the argument that if it's not subject to regulation as a security, people will be vulnerable is a little bit of a non sequitur argument because everything is regulated. All right. And yes, this will all lead into how you can do a compliant ICO, but it's important to drill into the details. I want to remind the room, and again, I'm happy to share this deck. I do it all the time. I want to remind the room that in every developed economy, and especially in the United States, the term security is not some fuzzy common law concept. It is a defined term. There's words on paper that were voted into effect by the US Congress, and that is the law. It's not what someone else says it is. So the main statute that's the basis of US securities law is the Securities Act of 1933, and of course, most of you also know the Securities Exchange Act of 1934. Well, it's very helpful because the Securities Act has a big section 2 with all these useful definitions. The very first definition is the definition of a security, which means you don't have to go necessarily to the SEC and say, hey, is this a security? Sometimes you don't want to ask a question because you don't want to hear the answer. So security is a defined term. The gray zone, the confusion creeps in. I'm not going to cover the whole thing, but in this concept of an investment contract, that's the analysis that the whole world is going crazy over, trying to decide whether or not this thing that's not a clear security, it's not clearly a stock, it's not clearly a bond, is this somehow magically an investment contract? And therefore, does it fall within the definition of a security? Therefore, the SEC and another jurisdiction, security regulator, would have jurisdiction. Despite what certain regulators and attorneys would say, investment contract is a defined term, and it's defined by the Howey case. Who's heard of the Howey case and the Howey test? If you're in tokens and crypto, have Howey printed on a small card and carry it with you in your wallet or your purse. Okay? There's a 4-pronged test that I'm not going to go completely through. I have plenty of videos on YouTube. Each one of those 4 elements must be true for the thing you're looking at to be an investment contract and therefore security. When you're analyzing a token and you're trying to figure out what the heck this thing is, and it's not clearly a note, a bond, or a commodity, whatever, you have to apply the Howey test. And if the Howey test, any one of those things is not true, for example, it's not true with Bitcoin because there's no common enterprise, and it may not be true with Ethereum because maybe it's decentralized enough that there's no common enterprise, it's not a security. Here's the big point. If it's not a security and you're not committing fraud, the SEC and other securities regulators do not have jurisdiction. They do not have the legal power to act. At least in the US, the SEC cannot regulate commodities. That's underneath the CFTC, Commodities and Futures Trading Commission. The SEC, despite what it thinks, can't declare war for the United States. It can't raise taxes. It can't declare a new national park. It can only regulate in the area of securities. So just following the whole logic train, if something does not meet the legal definition of a security, it must be something else. And if that something else is in the nature of a software license, that's a perfectly valid thing to sell where you do not need to register it with the SEC. You don't need to find an exemption with the SEC. You don't have to play this sort of song and dance. Okay, now, how do you actually use this? What do you actually do? Actually, one little thing I need to say first. Where people get messed up is this investment contract concept. When does that kick in? Well, if you have a token that's going to provide access to a platform, for example, Ethereum now or Filecoin, that's fine. It's usually clear that that's a software license or something like that and not a security. But the consensus almost all over the world is that before that token becomes functional, if people are buying those tokens and giving money to the platform so the platform can develop itself and make those tokens functional, then for that brief period of time, that pre-functional token may be a security. Right? It's kind of weird. This thing that doesn't really change its nature can start off as a security and evolve into something else. I think it's the first time that's happened in law. But where people get messed up, and where the reason people think that utility tokens and ICOs of utility tokens are dead, is most of these companies that got into trouble, most of them that received subpoenas, were selling pre-functional tokens to the public, taking the money, trying to build the platform, maybe building the platform, but the point of view of the SEC and others, as expressed in the Munchie order, the Munchie case, if you Google it, is that these pre-functional tokens, at least while they're pre-functional, will be treated like securities. Now, back in ancient times, mid-2017, the SEC came out and they said, oh, by the way, world, just so we're clear, this thing that you're calling a token may in fact be a security, and you should also be aware that pre-functional tokens are especially going to be a security, even if later on they won't be a security once they're functional. Then my favorite SEC commissioner, Hinman, I have my own personal favorite SEC commissioner. I don't know about you guys. My favorite SEC commissioner, Commissioner Hinman, came out and he gave a speech, a presentation. The SEC did not release something clear you could rely on, but he did give a speech. And he explained that even if you take the case of Ethereum, what did Vitalik do? What did the rest of them do? They had this idea for an Ethereum virtual machine, for this unstoppable, uncensorable virtual machine. He didn't have it built yet. So they set up a process whereby people could submit Bitcoin and get back these pre-functional, not usable Ethereum tokens. That's an ICO. There's a good argument that Ethereum was a security. So why isn't Ethereum banned? Because the US didn't want to mess with it, is the real answer. But the answer that Hinman later on gave was because it's evolved enough, it's become decentralized enough that even if it started off as a security, it's not now. Which means, by definition, not all tokens are securities. By definition. All right, so what do you do? And again, this is a half-an-hour presentation that I'm now being told to conclude. What do? Well, you set up your company in an ICO-friendly jurisdiction. I'll give you a hint which one I'm recommending because we're at the Malta Blockchain Summit and in general. MaltaCo sets up in Malta. Suppose MaltaCo is setting up the Malta Chain blockchain platform, and it's going to issue tokens, these Maltos, that once they're fully functional, they won't be securities under US law, Malta law, any law. But they need funds in order to set this up and get them from pre-functional to functional. What do? Well, you do not do what Munchie and the rest of these did. You don't sell free trading pre-functional tokens. That's a securities violation. What you can do in the US and other places is sell securities, whether it's a SAFT, a locked down pre-functional token, or some kind of indirect interest, which I can go over if you want to hit me up outside, to accredited investors under a proper exemption. Okay, if you use a proper exemption from a security sale, and I have a whole presentation on YouTube about this, you won't get busted. Then, this is worth $100,000. Take a picture of this, write this down, do whatever you need to do. When you set up your company's URLs or your websites, you're going to have a main URL for your project only. That's going to go on in time and last forever. All right. Maltaco.mt, okay, the top level URL for Malta. That's for the project. You do not mention the ICO or the tokens there. Then you set up a temporary website, temporary for your token sale. And you have two subdomains, two sub-URLs. Say us.maltacotokens.mt, and then maybe world.maltacotokens.mt. And you redirect IP addresses, you ask people where they're from, you try to get proof. You send US investors here, you send non-US investors there. That way there's no conflating your token sale website with your project website. And if you have to stop your token sale, that means you do not necessarily need to stop your project website. Okay, that happened to Munchie and a whole bunch of other ones. Have two different root domains. Don't make your token sale a subdomain of the main domain. All right. Then, of course, the question is, when does a platform become functional enough that a token stops being a security and starts to be a utility? When? It's like Microsoft Office is never done. Google Apps is never done. It's not like a house where you can point to it and say, this is done. When is a platform functional enough? When do tokens have enough functionality that they cross through that gray zone safely to the other side, and you can go, okay, whatever started off as, now it's clearly a utility token. Well, the analogy I always use is, in China, they have so much wealth that they need to invest. They're building these huge ghost cities, massive cities with empty buildings, parks, facilities, they're beautiful, and no one lives there, okay? That's like a lot of these ICO platforms, right? They don't even have the buildings, right? When do you know that your platform is functional? The answer is when your platform is populated and people are actually using it. Okay? Now, you have a chicken and egg problem here. If you want to get your platform populated and get people using it, your token is a security and you can't generally release it, how do you get them on the platform? How do you get the first pioneers onto your platform safely without violating security laws? Well, and avoid the Chinese Go City situation. Here's what you do, and I'm doing this with several clients, and it seems to work, and people are responding to it. You do a selective airdrop of your tokens to a defined early adopter community. You're not spamming people's wallets because some people are of the opinion that if you do an airdrop or give your tokens away for free, those aren't securities. That's not the case. Sorry. Okay, there's a little bit of legal twisting that the SEC is doing, and they say if you use the tokens, you're providing value in return for those tokens. Therefore, they're not really airdrops. They're really giving it for value. But you don't airdrop to everyone. You find and you form an earlier adopter community. You give people tokens in exchange for them beta testing and working on your product. And you want to have them really do that. By the way, and the more nonprofits you have in your earlier adopter community, for example, a UN agency that's out there to save kids, and you have a platform that's related to their function, if you're giving them tokens in exchange for them working on the platform, giving you feedback so you can improve it, that's a way to get people on the platform without doing a general distribution or ICO and without doing an airdrop to the whole world. And you have restrictions on the tokens. They can only transfer them to other early adopters. But that community starts growing as the platform matures. So over the next 6 months or so, you keep on expanding your early adopter group and keep it outside the United States. Then, once that platform is usable, it's functional, people are actually using it because they're using the functionality that they want to get out of it, then you can do a non-US utility token ICO. Now, people are concerned, well, wait a second. What if in the aftermarket those tokens end up in the US? What if you have over 2,000 US investors who own it, and now you're publicly traded in the US? The answer is no, you're not. We're being very conservative here. But those tokens, by definition, people are using them if they don't pass the Howey test, so their utility. If people are actually using them in real life for their function, they're software licenses. They aren't securities. Right, and again, I'm real crashing on time. Almost certainly going to get started traded on non-US exchanges. Then another 6 months or so pass, you start converting your SAFs or your Reg D tokens or sales to the US into the functional tokens. Well, that's not a securities issuance. Those are utility tokens now, and time has passed, and that platform has been seasoned. I bet that the Maltos, your tokens start getting traded on US exchanges, Coinbase, whatever. Then consider, once it's clear that the platform is not involving a security, and they're actually using it in real life, consider you can then do actually an ICO or secondary sale in the United States also. There's no rule, you just need to do one ICO. You can have a secondary CO, tertiary CO. You can keep on rolling your token sales. It is going to be almost impossible for any securities regulator to argue at that point that the token is a security. There would be a rebellion on their hands. So I moved fast, I went slightly over time. I want to thank you all, and I'm happy to give the deck or answer questions. Thank you.